to the middle of nowhere. It's peaceful, nobody around, certainly quiet. I could probably yell and scream and no one would hear me. But it's probably the worst place to put my marketing content if I hoped anybody would see it. But wait a minute, is it? When we think about creating content that reaches people, we naturally want to put it in places where the most people will see it. And certainly if I put up a billboard here, everyone who came here would notice it. But who is that? And how many is everyone? And over what time frame? And would it be the right audience? It's kind of like that paraphrase of the age-old question, if I make marketing and no one sees it, did I actually say anything at all? And unfortunately, that means while this might be the place where my message would stand out the most, this is where most marketing winds up. It's kind of ironic, actually. As marketers, we want to put our message, our content, in a place where we are sure that people will notice it. But we also want to have the best chance that a lot of the right people will notice it over the shortest available time frame. And unfortunately, that usually means we have to focus our media strategy on the busiest of places, where we have to fight with every other marketer who wants exactly the same thing. It's called media planning, and it's the heart of every great marketing strategy.
So whether I'm trying to get my media out in some big, wide open space, or whether I'm trying to compete in some busy, noisy marketplace, this is the question. How do I get my message to the right person at the right time in the right way? Welcome to the Las Virgenes Open Space Preserve. And it's open here. I gotta tell you, there's nobody around. And this is episode 2 of Marketing Makers, the show that's built for helping marketers make marketing work. That's right, I don't care whether you're a Fortune 500 CEO or a sole practitioner or somewhere in between, we could all use a classic lesson of how wonderful old marketing techniques are still used and evolved in today's marketing approaches. So, today we're talking about media planning, and specifically, how do we start working when we have become the media? Social media, media channels, owned media, shared media, earned media, it's all a big confusing mess. But I think some of the classic terms that we've come to play with media planning can still help us, and if we approach it in a new way, can really bring us marketing success. And we'll talk to one of the best practitioners I know in terms of brand, media, and making modern media planning work in today's marketplace. All right, well, to get started, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of this open space and get back to the Marketing Makers Lab. Welcome to Marketing Makers.
Oh, hi everybody. Welcome to the Marketing Makers Lab. I'm just trying to figure out some remote controls here. This is the Marketing Makers Lab, of course, where we explore in depth the background behind some of marketing's historical concepts and how they've evolved into some of today's most modern of approaches. And today, well, you can see I'm trying to figure out my remote control situation. Now, the thing is, I'm old enough to remember when I was the remote control for the television. You know, I would lie in front of the TV and my dad would say, try channel 5 or try NBC. And I'd switch the channel for him. There were basically 4 or 5 options in total. You had the broadcast networks, of course, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then we had a couple of local stations way up there, channel 13, channel 28, I think it was. Anyway, it seemed like the higher you went, the worse it would come in over the airwaves. And those were also just the days, by the way, where you'd leave one TV network on all night. If you can believe it, audiences were much more network loyal then. And they'd even identify as such. Oh, I'm an NBC person or I'm an ABC person. And today, Well, today I'm trying to figure out how I ended up with three remotes. I mean, I've got one that controls my direct TV and the 740 channels it provides. And I've got another that controls my television itself, but still gives me access to 30 to 50 other services like Netflix and Disney Plus and Apple TV and HBO Max and others. And then I've got another one that controls my Apple TV device and it gives me access to a few other networks and, of course, my music library and all. I mean, it's a lot. Okay. So before you start writing into me and sending me letters about how to combine all these, I know that's what I was reading the manual to do. I still haven't figured out how to get it below at least two. And that gets me to where we are with marketing and planning for our business's media strategy. So how did all that begin anyway? Well, it all starts and goes back to 1840. And there was a guy by the name of Volney D. Palmer, which is about as 1840 a name as you can possibly have. Anyway, he lives in Philadelphia and he noticed this market opportunity. He hypothesized that he could buy up large amounts of space in various newspapers at bulk and at a discounted price, of course. And then he could resell at a premium the space to companies that wanted to advertise in those newspapers. Now, the company would still handle all the design and the content creation for those ads, but Volney would basically be in the real estate business. And guess what? It worked. Yeah, Volney Palmer is largely credited with creating the first advertising media agency. But things changed very quickly. Less than 30 years later, a guy by the name of Francis Ayer founded an agency called the N.W. Ayer and Son Agency. And they started doing what was more common in those days, which was focused on creating slogans and content designed and ads for the advertisers themselves. Well, they acquired Palmer's media agency and they started to do both. They would not only help create all the content for those advertisers, they would help those advertisers place it in just the right newspapers. Now, you might remember some of their best work, such as When It Rains, It Pours. That was a campaign slogan for Morton Salt back in 1912. Or A Diamond is Forever. That was the slogan for De Beers Diamonds, created in 1947. And maybe the most famous of all was Be All You Can Be, created for the U.S. Army in 1981. Yeah, they really lasted that long. N.W. Ayer and Son only went out of business in 2002. But it is that late 90s and early 2000s that marks an incredibly important milestone in the discussion of media and marketing strategy. From the time that Ayer and Palmer first came together to combine the idea of content creation and the strategic placement of that content on media channels back in the 1800s, this is the standard way. It was standard operating procedure for marketing planning operations for the next 100 years. If you ever watch the show Mad Men, you'll have a new appreciation for how agencies and those companies combined the concepts of media planning and creative throughout the invention of all the mass media like radio and television and cable television and satellite television. But in the mid 1990s, there was a huge disruption. A new trend started to split the media planning strategy of where to put our content and the creative strategy of what content we should actually be creating. In the ad agency world, this is often referred to as the great unbundling of the late 1990s. Small planning agencies began to grow, big planning agencies began to thrive, and it would all culminate in the giant global agencies separating out, even if they were same part of the gigantic holding company, the functions of media planning and creative development. They were considered very separate categories. But why? Why did this happen? Well, as it turns out, the internet and the media channels there began to expand exponentially. It got, well, a lot harder to do media planning. You see, back in the time when I was the remote control for my dad, media planners had to plan for print, radio, and television. That was kind of it. The only places you could put your content to get attention from an audience. I mean, sure, there was billboards and there was some targeting, but it was mass targeting and mass audiences scale. And so agencies would simply charge clients a percentage of the total purchase of the placement of those various media. And as part of that service, they would give away the creative services and the strategy. Seems weird today, but it was the way it was. But now, as the 2000s approached and the late 90s sort of ended, well, there was not only 100 new cable TV networks with content for ever smaller niche audiences, But now there's websites and email and search results and mobile phones and social media. And it was not only exponentially more complex to do media planning, but because these channels were different, the numbers and types of creative pieces needed to be produced, well, that changed as well. So, as you might expect, marketers wanted better media planning and great breakthrough creative. They wanted both of those things and began to expect that agencies couldn't actually deliver it all as effectively as they might promise to. And the agencies, well, they wanted to make sure they were getting paid for all this amazing new different kinds of creative content they were creating for all these different channels. They didn't want to tie it to all of the complexity and difficulty that the new media planning landscape brought about. So, for all of these reasons, it was split up. You could hire two agencies or even develop an in-house team for media planning or creative development or even both. But okay, so what does that have to do with any of us today? What does that mean for us today? Well, the core of traditional media planning hasn't changed. We still need to balance it with standing out in the middle of nowhere versus trying to stand out in the middle of a busy media channel. Even in 2021, great media planning is still all about understanding which media channel gives us the best opportunity to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time so that enough of them take an action that we desire at a cost that makes sense for our business goals. That's the whole picture. So what does it mean? Well, it means that we really have to understand the foundation of media planning, because then we will be able to clearly see how it's fundamentally shifted into today's modern media planning, social media marketing, the use of owned media as part of our strategy. So, where does it begin? Where can we begin? Well, it all starts with some classic media planning terms that we still use to this day and which are important for us to understand as marketing makers. As I just mentioned, media planning as a concept hasn't changed. It's still the process where, through experience, research, or quite frankly, gut instinct in many cases, us marketing makers decide when and how often content needs to be placed on certain media channels in order to provide sufficient value for our business. Put very simply, we're trying to reach our target audience. We might buy our way into a target audience, such as in the case of advertising. We might try to earn our way onto a media channel, such as in the case of public relations or organic social media. Or we might try to attract them to our own media properties. But in order to figure out which of these you should do and how much effort you should look at, well, we got to look at a few factors that might use to judge where we're going to put all that content. So let's look at a couple of these. So the first one is, of course, flight dates. If someone asks, what are the flight dates? Well, these are simply the dates that you'll measure. It's a date where we start when our content is going to go live to an audience, and an end date when we'll assess the overall effectiveness of that content. So for example, you might look at a month as a flight. And then you'll want to look at, of course, impressions, or the total number of potential views you'll get to your content during that flight. Now, you may look at the total cost of those impressions. Now, because impressions are usually very large numbers in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands or even millions these days in mass media, the cost of impressions are usually expressed in what we call CPM, or cost per thousand. So for example, if the media platform promises you 100,000 impressions, meaning how many times your content will be seen in a certain time flight, and the quoted cost is, say, $10,000, it means that you have a CPM of $100. 10,000 times $100 per thousand equals 100,000. Then you'll also want to look at what's called net reach. Now, that's different than impressions because it's the number total of people, just individual people that saw your content. Now, this is important because, yeah, it's interesting to know the total number of impressions, but don't assume all those impressions are coming from different people. If the same wrong person views your ad or your content 200 times, well, it's still a waste of money. Knowing the net reach of the platform helps you on understanding the frequency, or how many times your content could possibly be seen by the same person. For example, Let's say we're guaranteed 100,000 impressions in a 1-month flight and a net reach of 40%. Well, that means that you're being promised that at least 40,000 of those 100,000 impressions will be a unique person. That means in a perfectly symmetrical world, and let's be honest, it's never perfectly symmetrical. Well, then obviously, with 100,000 impressions over 1 month on this platform, 40,000 unique people will see it, and each of those people would theoretically see it 2.5 times. Now, to be clear, there are obvious differences in value between an ad that would be repeated across a website or during the day on TV, how many times people see it, and an article or a show or other type of content that once you read it, you don't need to be continuously seeing it over and over and over again. So while higher net reach is always a good thing, not all repeat impressions are created equally. So as we move more into digital media, of course, we want to look at other things. We want to look at CTR or click-through rate. This is the average percentage of people who actually will take an action and click through to whatever it is you're calling them to do on your digital content. This may also be simply called a conversion rate if they're going to fill out a form or in some way have to do things just beyond clicking. And of course, when it comes to social media, we may have things like shares or likes or follows, which can be measured separately and may just also be considered other types of conversions. So we look all this, take it all, put all those different options together and numbers together. And what we do is we combine them with our audience research, knowing who they are and what they care about, and our strategic business objectives, and we get our media plan. This is the combination of all the media channels we'll use across a time period to try and achieve strategic success. You may have even heard the term integrated marketing communications plan, which honestly is a term that's been a little bit blurred out these days. But really, if somebody asks what your integrated marketing communications plan is, what they're asking is how you'll use your budget to mix up various media channels to reach a specific audience for your specific strategic business goals. It's that simple. So now you understand the foundational elements to examine your strategy as a media planner would, but that leaves us with a question. You might be saying to yourself, well, Robert, you said it's fundamentally changed. How has it fundamentally changed? Well, we'll talk about that in just a bit. But for now, what I'd like to do is get on to the next segment of our show. And that, of course, is time for us to go into the field and actually learn how this is really working. Let's learn from someone who's seeing our media planning change in real time. It's time for me to introduce this week's special marketing maker. Marcus Collins is an award-winning advertiser and a lecturer of marketing at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. It's there he helps bridge the academic practitioner gap for both degree-seeking students and business executives alike. He has spent the last decade helping blue-chip brands like McDonald's, Google, and AB InBev navigate the challenges of digital transformation in order to create contagious marketing ideas that extend across both the online and offline worlds of social. Throughout his career, Marcus has been acknowledged for his strategic and creative contributions as an advertiser. Marcus is a Clio Award winner, as well as one of Advertising Age's 40 Under 40 recipients. He's also launched such notable campaigns as Cliff Paul for State Farm, Made in America Music Festival for Budweiser, Hello Brooklyn for the Brooklyn Nets, and Ego Plus's Netflix's Stranger Things Conquest. Prior to his tenure in advertising, Marcus worked in music and tech as a startup co-founder. He also led iTunes and Nike sports music initiatives at Apple and also ran digital strategy for Beyoncé. Marcus truly embodies what it means to be a marketing maker. So, welcome to In the Field of Marketing Makers. And boy, do I have an amazing guest for this month's show. He is a really, really good friend of mine and someone I could not have handpicked to be a better expert when it comes to media planning, brands, culture, and what all that means to us as marketing makers. Marcus, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. I hope I can live up to that. Good grief. You set a really high bar for me.
Yeah, that is an understatement of what I just said. Well, let's dive right in here. You know, one of the things that we often see as marketing makers out there in the world is how media, what we think of when we think of media planning, right? So, I'm old, and so I have my own ways of looking at media planning and what we did as marketers to sort of optimize the channels for the best results. But what are you seeing these days as sort of the evolution of media planning from a marketing perspective? And then I want to talk a little bit about brands and culture as part of that.
Yeah. So I would say you are seasoned, not old.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well seasoned. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
I am the McCormick Spices of marketing. There you go.
So, when I think about that, so just thinking about that question, the first thing I think about is, all right, so this is some constructs. So we got media and planning. What does that really mean? Right. And media, by and large, is the vehicle by which information is delivered. Right. It's the vehicle by which information is delivered from a sender to a receiver. The planning side is strategically aligning this vehicle to a particular outcome. Right. So I got a new product. How am I going to deliver the right message with the right communicative payload within that vehicle to the right people? And historically, it's been, here's where all the people are. Get the messages in front of them, right? Here's what all people are. Let's create the wallpaper that's going to outfit the environment they're in, right? So MASH, right? Everyone's watching MASH back in the day, right? Then we should drop the communicative payload where these people descend around the MASH product. Today, though, the evolving media landscape, that is the means by which we consume media, has shifted drastically in that we aren't sort of audiences waiting shoulder to shoulder for things to wave over us, right? For information to wave over us. We are far more active in the creation of the product, of the communications, and that is we're reworking the communications as it comes our way. So as the media comes our way, we're not just watching this with the people next to us in the room. We're watching this with everybody, and there are means for us to engage in it, right? So Super Bowl happened, biggest media moment in the country. As ads are coming on, that is, people are delivering media at that moment, strategically planned. People are saying, didn't like that. That's whack. What does that mean? Lame. Hashtag Super Bowl. So people are reworking the meaning of those communications while it's happening. And because of that, we as marketers have to think differently about the way that we deliver our messaging, these communicative payloads. Instead of thinking about outfitting the room with wallpaper, should be thinking about how do we create the currency that becomes the way by which these people communicate. So I'm not blasting them with messages. Instead, I'm giving them I'm giving them conversation topics that they're going to interact with people who are just like them, because this is the currency that we use to connect with our people.
I think that's a incredibly important, it's a subtle but really important difference that you're pointing out here, which is one of the things that we've done as marketers forever is to go chase cool, right? To go and outfit our wallpaper, as you put it, into the coolest rooms that we could find. You know what I mean?
Proximity to cool.
Yeah.
They're cool. We're next to them, so we're cool too. Hey.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And so it used to be, for example, we would put an ad in the New York Times, or we would put an ad against, the television show Friends or MASH or whatever it was, not only because they had the audience there, but because we would somehow have some of their coolness
Yeah.
sort of rub up on us, right? We would
Right.
get to sort of draft a little bit with their brand, right?
Yeah.
So I put, the reason I pay a premium for New York Times is, well, because you're getting New York Times to appear at the top of your ad as the masthead there. Same thing, you're getting an ad on the Super Bowl, or you're getting an ad on Friends. Well, you're getting a little bit of rub off of Jennifer Aniston or whatever
That's
team
right.
was winning the game at that
That's right.
particular point. And it seems to me like what you're saying here is, as we start now not only serving as the wallpaper, but the conversation can happen about the wallpaper in real time,
Mm-hmm.
that element of sort of wrapping us up with the cool, people are separating that now. So we actually have to be able to, as brands and marketers, be able to react to that conversation and become the media, just like the audience is, right? They're becoming part of social media. So we're becoming part of the media as well.
Exactly. And I love that you frame this in culture, because what is happening is that we would wrap ourselves around or try to be adjacent to cultural product, right? Like television is a cultural product, right? You go to the movies, a cultural product, music, cultural product, and we try to bookend it, right? Like if it's the radio, 3 songs play, then our ad comes on because we know you're listening to Drake. Here's our ad right next to Drake, right? Either we're there because that's where the audience is amassed, where people are amassed, or we're there because we want the cool of Drake to somehow touch us, right? Or whatever adjacency we have. But today, if we want to have a meaningful role in the cultural or the media programming, then we too have to be cultural producers. And it's the thing, advertising is a cultural product, right? We just don't treat it as such. We treat it as a means of communicating the value propositions of our product. My razor sharper, my battery lasts longer, my car goes faster, right? And since that doesn't have very much cultural gravitas, we don't talk about those things because, right? But the things that contribute to the cultural characteristics that govern the people who are digesting and reworking the cultural product that they're watching, Friends, even MTV Real World, right? These things that were a part of the discourse that people were engaging with each other through and by, then the marketing communications, the ads have to be just as culturally salient. And the more powerful advertising, they stand up as such. Like, just do it is 3 words that have cultural meaning, right? Think different. Apple hasn't used that tagline in what, 30 years, 20 years, right? But those words have meaning because of the meaning frames by which they were observed and how they were delivered as cultural product. Advertising is cultural product, but you have to advertise. An advertiser, as a marketer, have to be committed to making that product, right? It's like, and so the idea then is that when we create messaging, communications, etc., and they're adjacent to a cultural product like the Grammys or the Oscars, the good advertising contextualizes their communications relative to what they're next to. So think about like immediately comes to mind for me is like the American Music Awards or the Grammys rather. Like when Target does an ad for the Grammys, it's always an artist performing in some really cool sort of thing. I think of the Gwen Stefani Target spot from a few years ago, right? They design contextually, they can design the messages contextually relevant to what they're next to, but what they create themselves is cultural product.
Yeah. Yeah. And tell me then, when you start thinking about it, right? Because one of the things we could run the risk of is sort of limiting ourselves to paid media here, right? Thinking about advertising or
Yeah.
sponsorship. But I think what you're talking about is as we start looking at, as a marketer, as a media planner, one of the things that we have to be conscious of is it's how we create all the content we're going to create in communications, right? It's not just that which we sponsor Imagine Dragons or Gwen Stefani or Drake or somebody like that, and have a paid piece of content sit adjacent to that. But it's also, to your point, how we start leveraging the original content we're creating, whether it's a blog, whether it's a resource center, whether it's a podcast, or whether it's to sort of personify that idea as well, to create that culture as well. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so I see it this way. I see it as, I love that you mentioned that did, like, we would talk a lot about paid media, but when we focus on what we do as creating cultural product as opposed to ads, the paid media immediately turns into what we all call it earned media. But essentially, if people talk about, right? They no longer have just a paid currency. They have social and cultural currency. That is, they have cultural currency, and people share them because they get social currency from doing it. Right? This is about culture. Look, culture is the governing operating system that guides and directs everything that we do. And when marketers contribute to the cultural governance that guide what we do, they become a part of the exchange that we talk about. Not only what we talk about, but what we wear, how we adorn ourselves. And they become markers, identity markers. So we think about the paid things that we create. When we create them in the mind that this is going to be worked and reworked by these people who subscribe to these cultures, then the accelerant is their pass along. Now, the point you're getting at is that, well, these other pieces need to be in lockstep. It's like, well, yeah, like you gotta hug it, right? You hugging it all around. So it's not just the one thing that feels like a one-off. It's like, no, we are a part of this. This is who we are. And all the pieces play together like a mosaic to show that this isn't a one-off thing. This is a demonstrative representation of a bigger commitment to these cultural characteristics that we are exuding in our messaging.
Yeah. It's like, to bring it down and into the real, it's, on one side, you've got Nike, who is living and breathing this with Just Do It, but also then creating the culture with what they're doing with Colin Kaepernick and taking a position on things and creating the content that isn't an ad, that in many ways is earned because it's just part of the social conversation.
That's right.
And then you look at something, that you would normally consider, okay, maybe it's a little banal, but it's not sexy like, music or acting or movies or anything like that. But you've got a company like HubSpot that creates inbound marketing, right? Which is a cultural phenomenon in the business world. And they can create, we as brands can create the conversation, can create the culture. And I think what I'm hearing you say is all of that is around, sort of widening our perspective around what media planning is all about, right?
I agree.
Yeah. It's about this idea that we're here to be that delivery mechanism to further the conversation, right? Not just paper the walls, but build the house and decorate the house and, the whole bit.
That's right. Now, I think of it this way, that our goal shouldn't be to create culture. It's to contribute to culture, right? We contribute to the beliefs, the
That's
artifacts,
a great way to put it.
the behaviors, the language that people already have. And what happens is that when we're contributing to it, people go, oh yeah, y'all heard about blah, 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 right? Oh yeah, this is what we do, right? People like us do something like this. Oh, you see that new spot about whatever thing? I know, right? So dope, right? It matches my this, or, I believe that. And a perfect example is like last summer, Ben and Jerry says, we must dismantle white supremacy. Whoa, Nelly, right? And this is a brand that's always been about progressiveness, right? They've been, one says liberal, I would say they've been progressive. They're all about like pushing toward social change. So this is not uncharacteristic of them to do this by any stretch. but they say it in such a way that is provocative, A, B, but they say it in the language that the people who believe that say it too. Instead of dressing it with like, racism is a bad thing. It's like, no. We should dismantle white supremacy. People who subscribe to that belief, that ideology, they go, I'm rocking with Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah.
Like that brand. And then they go, hey, Rob, did you see that thing that Ben and Jerry's did? You're like, I know, right? I love them. The brand is not the center point. The brand is the currency that connects you and I. That's the center point, us. So as marketers, we contribute to culture by creating cultural product that becomes a part of the discourse, the negotiation, construction process that people go through to create social solidarity, right? To form the walls of social solidarity. So what it means for marketers, like I said, just bringing it on down, what it means for marketers is identifying, what do we believe? How do we see the world? And what are the ideologies that we have? Who out there sees it the way we do? That informs the messages that I create, the vehicles to deliver said message, i.e. the media, and where or what contextual moments I deliver them to those people. And that requires planning. Yeah. And to me, that is media planning, contemporary media planning. It's like, how do I communicate? How do I preach the gospel to the collective of the willing, to the congregation of the willing, finding them in the contextual places where this isn't about me sort of preaching it from the mountaintop. This is about me saying it in a way that is evocative, that is distinctive, but also congruent with their ideology. So you hear it and go, Marcus, did you hear this thing that this guy just said? Dude, that's so on point, perfectly said. And to me, if you look at like headlines and like, clickbait, et cetera, they do that so well. They communicate like the ideology so fast, which is why we share it so rapidly. And brands, we spend a lot of time focusing on our value propositions as opposed to our ideology, that our stuff don't get shared. We spend a lot of money on paid media, that is paid vehicles that have communicative payloads in them, instead thinking about how do we create catalysts for discourse.
Yeah. It's funny. We, to add on to your Ben and Jerry story, the company was nominated for a content marketing award this year. And what I absolutely adored about the story, and the story was, of course, about how they had sort of taken some of the social justice content to market, and, how the founders are so passionate about the things that they want to talk about.
Yeah.
And this is the part that I absolutely, it gets a chef's kiss, right? Which is the way that they measured it was they were like, we're going to let those guys be those guys. Let them do what they're going to do. Let them create the content. Let's create it. And what we're going to do is a measurability is not figure out how much more we're selling, but to ensure that we can be part of this cultural zeitgeist and have it not negatively affect sales.
That's right.
In other words, they measured how much they could completely separate the idea of product sales from the idea of being part of the culture. And I just love that as sort of a success metric, which is, can you be more of your brand and have it not impact your sales as a measure of success? It's such a cool idea.
So good. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's like, man, it's so great. I mean, it's got my mind like racing, because it goes to this idea that if you ask a company why they exist in a very Simon Sinek way, they'll tell you to make money, etc. Right? But like, to me, it's like no, money allows you to live out an ideology, just like the body needs white blood cells to live. But like our job, like the purpose of life isn't to make white blood cells. There's something far greater. And I think that a company saying like, what do we believe? How do we do that while not negatively affecting the money? It's such a turn of phrase from how do I know if I do that, I'll make more money? It's like, no. The goal is to do this. Right. And as long as I can keep the lights on, all good. Isn't that what we do? We try to switch jobs. Like I have a passion to do this. How do I pay my bills and still do this?
Yep.
Like that's the idea. How do I maintain because that's the byproduct. But what I really want to do is live out this ideology. But it requires having an ideology, unfortunately, for a lot of companies.
What does it, I mean, so if I'm sitting at my desk now and I'm thinking about all of these ideas, planning media, becoming part of the conversation, a lot of this obviously has to do with social media, right? And how we leverage the conversation to help the brand, to help our, purpose, whatever it may be. What are the things, what should I be thinking about, right? I'm a rank and file practitioner. What you guys, Marcus and Robert, are talking about, that's way above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But what am I to think about all of that, right? As a marketing manager, what am I to think about all of that? And what should be some things that I might want to start to do to become more proficient at this?
Yeah. I think the first thing is, what do we believe? What's the ideology? Like, it's somewhere. It's either on the wall in your office somewhere, it's in a deck somewhere, maybe it's in the mission statement, or maybe it's with the founder, right? It's the founder started the thing for a reason. What does the brand believe? It's ideology. We start there. Then the idea becomes, how do I communicate that in a way that is distinctive and evocative? Right? How do I communicate the ideology? Then thinking about, so who are the people who see the world the way I do? Who are those people? Right? You can think about making it as big as you want to, or in multiple buckets of who these people are. And then say, where are they? Where are they in their media ingestion? Are they on social networking platforms? Are they on these blogs? Are they watching these shows? Are they living in these physical places? How are they? Is it? Are they using Slack or whatever the case may be? Right? Like, where are these people? Then we ask, so how do I deliver that gospel that I know how to say in a very distinct and evocative way? How do I deliver the gospel to those people through those mediums, those vehicles of information in the right contextual moments? Like that's the math.
Yeah.
What do I believe? How do I communicate in a way that's evocative and distinctive? To whom am I going to preach this gospel to? Where are they in the world, be it the zeros and ones world or the physical world or a combination of the two? And then what are the right contextual moments where I reach them? And then by that very nature, if we approach it that way, what you say isn't my razor sharper, my body will last longer, my car goes faster. You'll tell them that later. The idea is to start with, here's what I believe. And the way you communicate that is creating cultural product. We start with the soul and end with the cell. And then once they're like, I believe that too. Then you say, girl, come get some of this ice cream.
I love that so much. And what's so beautiful about what you just said is that it's truly the classic process of media planning hasn't changed. It's figure out your audience, figure out where they are, figure out what you want to say to them, and now figure out how you can be part of their conversation. It's that simple.
And it never changes. We're just talking about people. Look, we have been by and large the same since our sub-Saharan African days. Like this is who we are. Like, we're wired very much the same. Some people argue there's some rewiring. I'll give you that. I'm not a neuroscientist, but fine, I'll give you that. But by and large, we are wired very much the same way. And the technology changes really, 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 really fast. We change very, 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 very slowly. So a lot of the things that we've been doing as marketers, the philosophy is still the same. The executions are different, sure, but the behaviors are still very much the same. And it really just boils down to, instead of us telling stories, let's start some stories.
Oh, what a perfect way to end. What a perfect way to end. Marcus, my friend, thank you so very much for being on the show today. It was just absolutely, I knew it would be, and it's just absolutely perfect. I love that so much. Thank you so much for being here.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So welcome back. Welcome back to the Marketing Makers Lab. And here's where we're going to talk about the future of making this practice of media planning even better. As a marketing maker, you now understand the concept of integrated marketing and communications planning and the important concepts, of course, of understanding the various attributes that can help you determine which media is going to be the most important for your strategy. These are all core concepts that will help you become a smarter and more savvy marketing maker. But how do we make this practical, especially in today's very fragmented media world? How do you today, as a marketing maker, apply integrated marketing and communications planning to a modern content and marketing strategy? Well, it goes back to something I talked about at the very top of the show. We go all the way back to Volney B. Palmer and his original concept back in the 1800s for media planning. Remember, media was real estate, a place, empty lots, primed for development. And the media planner was a real estate developer, aligning the best places for filling them with the best commercial tenants that would pay for access to it. Now, things are different today. This is where you, as a marketing maker, have an advantage of looking at owned media and a different way of looking at media planning. The rise of social media, and more broadly, the approach of content marketing and owned media as a strategy, we have become the media. Our brand, our company, and we as people have become the media that we use to look at as a separate thing. We are the place where those invested dollars are hopefully attracting our targeted audience and their attention and their loyalty. And that's a different equation. As marketers, we have to realize that in today's world, our website, our blog, our resource center, and our social media efforts, all of it can be working media too. Our media efforts become part of the integrated marketing and communications plan as well. Let me give you an example of this. I'll tell you the story of the Cleveland Clinic, and they launched a health essentials blog back in 2013. It grew very quickly through the creation of wonderful content, media, to 200,000 monthly visits to 3.2 million monthly visits in just 18 months. And today, the blog receives more than 4 million monthly visitors, making it one of the most visited online healthcare destinations on the internet. And additionally, with more than 1.5 million Facebook fans and 500,000 Twitter followers, Cleveland Clinic's Health Essentials content brand has more audience than most media publications focused on consumer health. They are the healthcare media. So when we think of media planning for Cleveland Clinic's marketing strategy, their own site is rightfully often the winner when they look at achieving the highest percentage of working media. And their evaluation of where else they should put their budget for the best return on cost per thousand and, of course, net reach, well, becomes their own Health Essentials site. That is an investment worth making. There's a lot of pressure on today's marketing maker to look at every new app, social media, network, technology, or even different websites through the classic lens of real estate-focused media planning, a separate place where our audiences are aggregating, and thus, maybe so should we. However, chasing audiences like we used to do isn't as productive as it once was. In today's world, there are simply just too many channels for us to keep up. It's not just print, radio, television, and billboards any longer. If we always chase our audiences with content where they're aggregating and chase them more and more with more ads and more media channels, we may ultimately fragment those audiences to the point where it's impossible to reach them at all. Put simply, if a part of our audience gets everything they need from our Facebook page, well, then we become dependent on that Facebook page, that media channel. Multiply that by Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Clubhouse, and the next 2 or 5 channels that come along, and we may find ourselves having to prioritize just which small part of our whole audience we're able to address at any one time. As today's marketing makers, we are no longer simply tenants on rented real estate. We are makers, creators of media, and that attracts and builds audiences that we will value and will in turn value us. We can and will use the classic and well-worn media planning methods to determine that value. But instead of determining the best place to rent, we'll be choosing the best plot of land to own. And that's it for number 2 of Marketing Makers from, well, the middle of nowhere. It's peaceful here and maybe the worst place to place some media of my marketing message. You know, when we think about creating content that reaches people, we do want to put it in places where the most people will see it. And certainly if I put up a sign here, everyone who came here would notice it. But shouldn't I put it somewhere where I know the right people will get it? And yes, that might be a noisy, busy place. But as we move forward, we might just find that the best place to put a message is our own backyard. Until I see you next month, it's your story to tell. Tell it well.